Welcome to the Mekko Graphics webinar. I'm David Goldstein, and we're going to walk you through some chart makeovers this morning. It'll be about a half an hour session. What we're going to do is start by showing you some charts, both before and after, and we'll work you through on some of them how to make the changes and really improve the charts and make them more impactful. And we will have one of my colleagues answering questions during the webinar, so you can use the chat feature in GoToMeeting to put in your questions, and I will stick around after the webinar to answer your questions as well. So if you want to save some stuff for the end, feel free to do that, and I'll try to get to your questions at the end. So let me just dive right in. So here's my first before chart. This is sort of a typical chart that you might see in PowerPoint or Excel if you're looking at revenue changes over time. Very simple chart to create, very simple stacked bar chart or simple bar chart. And all you can see really from this chart is revenues. They're sort of slow and steady growth in the revenue, but we can make this chart over and I think make it significantly more impactful. So here's my after chart on the first chart, and I did a few things to make the chart more effective, more impactful. First thing I did was I added a growth line. You can see it right here, and that quantifies the growth over time, and you can see that it's 5% per year with the using the CAGR formula. The second thing I did was I split out my revenue into key categories, and here you can see that we've got three categories that make up probably a little less than half of our revenue, and everything else is in other. And then I added a CAGR column, and you can really, with the CAGR column, you can track. You can figure out really why revenue is increasing by 5% a year. You can see that it's a large growth in the medical category, up 14%, and much smaller growth in the smaller segments. The other segments, they're only up 3%. And to call that out, to highlight that, I made the medical category red, and I even made its label and its CAGR number red as well. So that gives you a sense of the why revenue changed over time. So first chart, you can see the impact of just adding a couple Mekko Graphics features, the CAGR column and the growth line, and also doing a little more work to dive in and split out your overall revenue into revenue categories. Second makeover chart is a simple cluster bar chart. This is the kind of chart that you would use to look at performance trends over time. So here the notion is I'm some sort of fund and I'm tracking my performance again. The problem with this chart is that if you just look at the chart, it doesn't tell you much. You really have to look at the tagline to know the message of the chart, that the fund has outperformed its benchmark in 9 of the last 11 years. So what I'd like to do is make over this chart, really drive the message home in the chart so you can see it, even if you don't have the tagline. So here is my made over version of the chart. I just did a couple of things to the chart to drive the impact and drive the message home. First thing I did was I added an axis break in 2008, and that axis break really helped you focus on the data above the data in the years with positive performance. A lot of that was drowned out by 2008 in the older chart, and here you can actually see all of the years more clearly where our fund outperformed its benchmark. And the second thing I did was I added a data row. The data row helps you focus on the relative performance, and you can see only the 2 years, 2008 and 2010, where performance was below the benchmark. And those, I highlighted those by bolding them and putting the performance in red. Depending on how you want to drive the message home, you could either do that. You could either do that or not. That's definitely optional. So, moving on to my third chart, and here in this chart, when I do the makeover, I will dive in and edit the chart in Mekko Graphics, so you can actually see what I did to update the chart. So, P&L is something that we often see in charts, and we often get questions. You know, how do I show my profit and loss for my company or my division in a chart? What's a good chart to summarize the P&L for a series of years, or to do a P&L comparison across different divisions or different companies? We see a lot of these charts as cluster bars, and we don't really think that a cluster bar is a good way of driving this data home. And here you can see in the cluster bar that it's really difficult to compare the trends over time. In this chart here, it is the revenue bar that seems to dominate the other bars, and you really don't have a sense of much of the data. So let me show you the alternative, the chart that we like. Chart that we like for P&L is a stacked bar chart with a couple of extra features that really help make it more impactful. So I've taken a simple stacked bar chart with one bar for each year, or if I was doing a company by company comparison, one bar for each company. I show my revenue as positive above the line, and I show my expenses as negative below the line here. And then I add a neat Mekko Graphics feature, the net line, and I use the net line to show net income. And that just appears in each of the bars here. You can see it. The other things I did was I added a CAGR column, and the CAGR column allows you to show growth in each of the segments. So you can see that revenue is growing 16%, but my R&D expenses are growing 30% per year. So that's a big call out that you couldn't see in the cluster bar chart. And I kept my net margins as a data row at the bottom of the chart. So I think this is a much better way as well. It's a much better way to show P&L than the cluster bar that I showed you before. So let me see if I can jump in, and hopefully you can see my my screen now. I've gotten out of slideshow mode, hidden my notes, which you don't need to see, and I'm just going to double click on this chart to show you how I made this this stack bar. So I'm running the latest release version of Mekko Graphics 7.5. So if your Mekko Graphics might look a little different, then you probably have an older version. So from here, I wanted to show you a few things. One thing I wanted to show you was the chart data, the data sheet. So if you look at the data sheet, you can see that here are my revenues shown positive, my expenses all shown negative. Here, my net income is just a formula, revenue minus expenses. My CAGR column is also a formula, and if you don't know, Mekko Graphics does provide a CAGR formula built in, and here it is. First year, first period, last period, number of periods, and that just I just use that formula to compute all my CAGRs, and net margin is also is also a formula. So the other thing that I did that you can do in the data sheet is you can set your rows and columns appropriately. So I can show my series here as a data row, which I did for net income, and I also did for net margin. Oh, I just did for net margin, sorry. And for net income, I set as a net line. I can show my CAGR data as a CAGR column, all right in the data sheet. The other way to do that, and often in Mekko Graphics we have multiple ways to do the same thing, is through the format bars and series. So if you open up format bars and series, you can get an overall view of all of your bars and all of your series, which ones are data rows, which ones are data columns, which ones are net lines. So I can look at my series and you can see net income. I can just show as a net line by checking this box. Net margin I can show as a data row by checking off include in the chart and just include it here as a data row. The same with my bars. I can just click off show in the chart and I can click on show it as a CAGR column. A couple of other things I did on this chart that I wanted to show you. One is I added the legend and I formatted the legend so that it appears aligned with my CAGR. So that gives you the legend lined up right next to the CAGR, which I think is a really nice feature. And the other thing I did on the net lines themselves here, I just need to click on the net line. If you right click on the net line, I said include net line values. The values don't appear above the net line by default. You have to click on the net line and say include net line values to get these values appearing up here. If I click off, the values will go away. Great. I hope that was helpful. I hope that convinced you that that using this stacked bar approach is a great way to show P&L, and maybe showed you some new features of Mekko Graphics like the net line and the align legends to CAGR. So moving on to the next one. Here I've got a stack bar chart. What I'm trying to do is show the growth in smartphone sales in China across the 5 major competitors, which I've got listed down here, all of them growing between 20 and 50+% a year, between 14 and 15. All my other competitors are shrinking, losing about 25%, and my total market is growing at about 2.5%. So, I mean, it's got the message here, but again, I think there's a way to make it more impactful. So I guess I can switch to screen show mode for a second. So here in screen show mode, here's the chart that I think is a more impactful way of delivering the same message, and that's turning my stacked bar chart into a bar Mekko chart. We're big fans of the bar Mekko. We don't think our customers use it as much as they could. It really adds an extra dimension to a stacked bar chart that can be very useful. So in this case, the widths of the bars are computed by the relative market shares of each of the competitors. So you can see the widest bar here is all others, which makes up 41% of the market, and you can see that Apple and Apple and the number 2 competitor, whose name I'm not going to be able to pronounce, make up have the next widest bars. So it's a great way. The bar Mekko is a great way to show that. Let me just show you a couple of things in the chart to show you how we make the bar Mekko. So I'm going to double click on the bar Mekko. Here we go. And again, I will click on the data sheet. So a couple of things to notice here. One is I've got my shipments data, which doesn't show up on the chart, but I use it for calculations. And I also use it as my bar width. So that's how you tell Mekko Graphics which of the bars is going to be used to set, which of the rows is going to be used to set the bar width. Then you can see that I've got my market share, which are my bar heights for each of my competitors here, and by laying them out diagonally, Mekko Graphics will assign each of them a different color. And then right here, I've added my market share as a data row and my average selling price as a data row, and my total market growth I added as a data column. And then I cheated a little by moving my data column header down here so it sits right next to my my total market growth line. So it's pretty easy to make the bar Mekko chart. Really, the only trick is to tell Mekko Graphics which series, which row in your spreadsheet is going to be used to set the bar width. So I'm going to move on to my next chart, which is a cascade. And Mekko Graphics really has the ability to do horizontal and vertical cascades. We got this cascade like this from one of our customers, and they asked us, how can I really drive home the message better? How can I change this cascade to drive home the message better? And here what we're doing is looking at unit volume. We're going to show, this is clearly someone showing several changes that they're going to make. Oops, sorry, I jumped the gun. Several changes that they're going to make to increase unit volume from 326 million to 488 million between 2014 and 2020. So how do I make this more effective? And you might have seen the answer when I flip there and flip back. I changed the cascade to go in the other direction, horizontally instead of vertically. I think that's an easier way to see from left to right. And I added axis breaks, and the axis break in the cascade lets you focus your attention on the deltas, on these changes. If you don't have this axis break, all of these items become very, very small. Some of them are very small anyway, but even the big ones seem much smaller without the axis break. And then I added this bar comparison line to show the to highlight the change between 14 and 20, and showed that as a percentage in the bar comparison line. So switching from horizontal to vertical, showing as adding the axis breaks and showing the bar comparison line really helps you drive home the message of the cascade. So let me just show you how I did that. I'll double click on the chart. Here, just adding the axis break is really just a question of clicking in this segment or in this segment where there is spot for the axis break, and just say insert axis break. And then if you click on the axis break itself, you can make it smaller or bigger depending on how you want to show the data. Same with the bar comparison line. It shows up right here on top. If I delete it, I can just add the bar comparison line, and it's easily movable. Doesn't make much sense to move it in this example, but it is easily movable by just dragging and dropping it. And the other thing I wanted to show you on this chart is how easy it is to switch a Mekko Graphics chart from horizontal to vertical. So in the format chart area, there's a chart layout. I can switch horizontal to vertical just here. And then I can switch it from bottom to top to bottom through this button here. And I can even move my y-axis from the bottom to the top of the chart. So you got a lot of freedom to alter the look and feel of your Cascade chart through the format chart area. Let me just bring that back to what it was. I'm almost done. Got a couple more charts to show you. For the last couple of charts, what I wanted to do was show you what I've done with some data that I've found online and how I've turned the online data into Mekko Graphics charts and made it, I think, more appropriate for a presentation, and in some instances, I think, also delivers the message a little more clearly than the charts that I found online. So I found this in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago. It was reporting on the performance of the endowment funds of the Ivy League universities, and you can see that they listed in a simple bar chart the returns of the funds organized from top to the bottom, with Princeton sitting at top and Cornell at the bottom. And the second column of this table, they used bubbles to show the relative size of the endowments, and here you could see that Harvard's, even though it was near the bottom in performance, was by far the largest fund in terms of assets under management. And the point of the article was that the funds with the longest tenured leaders were also the funds with the highest performance, and Harvard seems to be struggling with a new endowment chief, and even though it's got a pretty large fund, pretty average annualized return. So I took this data and decided maybe there's a better way to show it. And what I went with was the bar Mekko again. You saw bar Mekko a few charts ago. So here in this bar Mekko, I showed annualized return as the bar height. You can see organized from highest to lowest return, going from left to right, with Princeton at the top and Cornell at the bottom. And then I used for the bar widths, I used assets under management. So you can see here that Harvard is the widest because it's got the most assets under management. I left assets under management as a data column at the bottom of the chart, and I also added the endowment chief's tenure as a data column at the bottom of the chart. And just for fun, I colored each of the university's segments in the university's own colors. So I've got Princeton here in its traditional orange, and Harvard in its crimson, and you can see, if you know the colors of all of the Ivy League, the colors of all the Ivy League schools. So one more chart. This again I took from the media, a little topical as the U.S. elections are approaching. The New York Times a few weeks ago wanted to drive home the message that the number of people who voted for either Trump or Clinton in the primaries was relatively small compared to the total U.S. population. And they came up with this box approach to doing that. I didn't find this very useful, and I came up with an alternative that I thought was hopefully significantly better, and hopefully you think the same. So I turned the box chart into a Mekko chart, I decided to group the potential voters into 3 bars. Out of the 324 million people in the US, about 100 million are ineligible to vote, most of them children, makes up 23% of the 324 million people. People who are not yet citizens and convicted felons. Then you can see the biggest category here of the 324 million are 160 million people. Almost half the population didn't vote in the primaries. About half of them don't vote at all in elections, and the other half vote in elections, but for one reason or another did not vote in the presidential primaries. And then if you limit that, you've got only 60 million people left, and you can see that about half of them voted for the 2 candidates, Clinton or Trump, and the others voted for other candidates in the primaries. So I thought a better way to drive home the message that of the 324 million citizens of the US, only 9% voted Trump or Clinton in the primary elections. The one thing I wanted to show you in terms of how to do that, just a feature that we introduced in a relatively recent version of Mekko Graphics in the Format Chart tab, which is going to load here. You can show segment number, which I did here, and also segment percent, which I did here, and I put them each on a separate line. And this little button here tells you to put segment number on a separate line from segment name, and this button, clicking the button here, lets you set segment percentage on a different line than segment name. And in this chart, in the data sheet for this chart, I added a row for total US population, which I put across all of the bars, and I used this row as what I call my 100% row. So this row is the denominator in the percentage calculation I used in the bar chart. So rather than percent of this bar, this is the percent of the total US population, the 23 million. So I hope that was helpful. I hope the chart makeovers were useful to you. I hope they showed you maybe showed you some new features of Mekko Graphics, or new chart types, or just new ways of thinking about how you can turn your Mekko Graphics data into more effective charts. A few resources to walk away with. One thing, we will be posting this deck and the webinar video, and we will send you an email either later today or tomorrow with the links to the deck and the video. If you want to see some more charts, we would suggest taking a look at the Mekko Graphics chart gallery, which is on the website. There are about 150 different charts there. If you want to see a new chart example every week, I would encourage you to subscribe to the Chart of the Week blog. Some of the charts in this deck came from the blog. Specifically, the last couple of charts came from the Chart of the Week blog. If you want to know how to do things in Mekko Graphics, you can take a look at the videos which we've got online. I would always encourage you to follow Mekko Graphics just to keep up with the latest goings on. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and I'm personally on LinkedIn, and you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, and also have a view into the Chart of the Week and the other things that I post. And any questions you have or any product feedback, feel free to to email me, and here's my email address. And as always, you can also email our support team, and their email address is support@meccographics.com. It's 11 o'clock. I promised half an hour. I stuck to my half hour. I want to thank you all for attending the webinar. I will be available to answer any questions. I will stick around online for a little while longer, and please use the chat feature in GoToMeeting to ask me any questions, and I will try to answer them. Thank you so much, and look forward to talking to you at the next webinar.